Good evening, and welcome to ScreenTone Club. This is your fortnightly look at manga, episode 58, recording on the 9th of August 2020 for release on, I guess, the 25th of August 2020. This is why you shouldn't get ahead of yourself and start buffering episodes, because you get so confused, as more than usual, as it turns out. My name is Elliot Page, and I'm joined as always by my lovely co-host, Mr. Andy Hanley. How you doing, Andy?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you.
That's great. Yeah, it's been a bit hot recently, even for here, the wilds of Scotland, and so I'm currently sweating myself stupid. Thankfully, though, I don't have any physical mug to sweat onto, or else that'd be a rather dicey proposition. Let's face it.
Yeah, like having heard people sweltering in like 30 plus degree temperatures, like I feel like we're pretty, we have it pretty easy up here in Scotland because like a hot day is usually like mid-20s at the very worst, and it's not even been quite that high. At least here in Glasgow, so it's been pretty pleasant overall.
Yeah, I'm waiting for. I mean, hopefully the BBC is not lying to me, because we're scheduled to have a 2-day thunderstorm, and I could go with that right now. Like, I love a good thunderstorm. The complete polar opposite to a lot of manga heroines, as it turns out. One less charm point I have. Anyway, if you like what we're doing, maybe not the banter, you can support us on Patreon. Please consider doing so. It helps keep us online. It keeps us honest. It means you don't have to run advertising. And it also means it can help defer the cost of all the manga we keep reading for this podcast. You can also get a shout out from us, like Mr. Rob Jessup, who very kindly supports us at the city tier of $12 a month. But if you just want our bonus episodes, which we release monthly, you can support us from a mere $1 a month. And that way you get the bonus episodes, both the ongoing ones and what previous. Also, if you're on the $3 and up tier, you get to vote on what we cover in the bonus episodes. We've got some good, as mentioned before, we've got some good stuff in the voting bucket. Nothing has quite roared ahead of the rest, but looking like we're going to have some interesting stuff to talk about. Talking about that, our next part of the episode is Returning Champions, where we look at series we discussed previously on the podcast, if we've kept up with them on our own time. I'm going to throw the ball directly at you, Andy, because I am deadly curious to know about you catching up on Chainsaw Man. Please read Chainsaw Man.
So I have, having been told multiple times by yourself to read Chainsaw Man, and to be fair, having wanted to read more of it, and it's one of those things that it just kept like slipping through the cracks in terms of catching up with my backlog. The other weekend I finally kind of got through and burnt through it to get up to date. And I kind of read like the latest chapter this morning, so that I was absolutely bang up to date at the time of recording this. I'm not sure, like, there are mortal words that are kind of available to really describe the experience of reading Chainsaw Man at this point in time. Because, I mean, there are so many things about this series that either are directly dumb or should be dumb and should be things that I don't like, but man, is it, like, a compelling page-turner in spite of all of that stuff. Like, at its worst excesses, it's kind of like Elfen Lied and Evangelion had some kind of terrible love child, and like that's not anything that anybody should ever say or think about anything. But
Andy, no, you're making me think about it. Fuck off.
But like somehow, in spite of all of that, and like in spite of there being very kind of like edgy entire chapters of like, well, now we're in hell and everyone's limbs are flying off, it still has these kind of incredible high points that kind of really punctuate everything that series does incredibly well. Like, I mean, it's every time I'm sort of at a point where I'm just rolling my eyes and like, man, maybe this has finally jumped the shark and kind of gone too far. It suddenly
that's also a direct reference,
which yes is also like something it literally does, but in a more figurative sense. Like, it was sometimes, I feel like Chainsaw Man is about to jump the shark, and then it somehow manages to like pull together something really powerful and kind of rein itself in a way that's really kind of impressive. And yeah, it's like it's a roller coaster ride. Like, it kind of it pulls in so many of the dumbest kind of shonen tropes of just like, characters who incessantly die and then undie, all of that kind of stuff. And it somehow makes all of that work. And I don't know, apparently the whole thing is now just like about nuclear armaments. So sure, okay, fine. That's good too, I guess.
Yeah, totally. It's taken a weird like I kind of realized it when I was rereading it for like the 8th time the other day, is that it's taken a weird turn into like Hideo Kojima disarmament / deterrent theory, which is terrifying in a weird way of like, you know, it's so bizarre because you can write a bullet point list of this manga, and this is, again, one of the reasons I love it so dearly and demand everyone read it, is that it's a manga where the main character is a goddamn moron, and he is, but at the same time, like, he is doing the best with his life, which does objectively suck nuts, and even his antagonists are kind of feeling bad for him. It's also the series that has like a gonad kicking competition as the cathartic end point of an arc, and it's also it's also a series where, like you mentioned, that some characters just die and come back to life because that's what they can do, but at the same time, like, characters just straight up die, and people say, no, they're dead, they're gone, like, fuck that, they're gone, like, that's it, like, this is it, like, death is part of this world, and people use it to their ends to get ahead, and perhaps even you could argue some things are worse than death that happen, and, you know, even in the middle of completely stupid fights with changing allegiances, characters are like telling each other important truths or things that help them get through the day. And Denji, being the titular chainsaw man and a complete doof, is kind of the ultimate like blank slate for all of it. Especially because like it does the whole shonen power up stuff, but the main thing is that all the power exists within him, but he's too stupid or kind of fine with what he has to know how to better use it. I mean, hell, there's an entire power up chapter where characters are basically saying to him, hey, you could use your chainsaws in more exciting ways. And then it cuts to the last page and he's found the most stupid way possible to do it in a way that makes no one happy, but it's effective, so who cares? That is also in regards to jumping the shark in particular. And so, yeah, it's all reasons I love this thing and find it so endlessly fascinating. Is like, it's very, very frighteningly real at times where it's like, haha, it's the funny chainsaw man. Oh fuck, I feel really garbage reading this because I really cared about these moronic characters. And I'm just glad that you also came to enjoy it, Andy. So
yeah, well, I think that's kind of the fascinating thing about Denji as a character, because like, especially sort of early on, and I think, you know, when we initially sort of covered this series, we sort of touched on it a bit, that like, you know, he is a complete idiot, and it's sort of, there was always this kind of like worry in the back of my mind that like, I'm not sure that I'm ever going to kind of completely warm up to him because he's such an idiot. But like, the way the story plays with that character and that archetype is so incredibly smart, to be honest. Cause like, you know, there are entire sort of story arcs. I mean, there's a story arc that kind of, again, almost plays with like the traditional shonen trope of like, well, the fight between us is over, maybe now we can be friends and we can be buddies, and it toys around the edges of that, and it's just like, nope, you idiot, like, the person that wanted to kill you still wants to kill you, you should probably just like cut that out right now and just like leave them to it. Which is kind of really fun. And it also like manages to be surprisingly heartfelt and touching in places. Like, there's a fantastic kind of effectively a break between story arcs where you have kind of like Denji, Power, and is it Aki who's kind of like overseeing them?
Yes, it's Aki.
And yeah, like they just build up this incredible kind of like sort of just temporary family unit in this way that is really actually surprisingly powerful, where they're all kind of a mess, like post events that have happened either directly to themselves and to people around them, and they just kind of come together as this kind of coping unit of just like, okay, we're all just gonna basically hold on to one another for dear lives until we kind of get through the direct aftermath of this thing and kind of work through some of the issues that we have. And it's sort of, I mean, again, to keep going on thick with like the Evangelion comparisons,
I was about to say that as well, don't worry.
It's kind of a lot like the kind of Misato Shinji Asuka kind of like family unit that builds up in Evangelion, except that never actually really succeeds in kind of tempering anybody's angst. Whereas this one actually somehow, despite two of the three people involved being complete and utter morons, just kind of works as this perfect family unit where they all have their place and their role to play in kind of making the other two feel better about things. And it just, it's this really weird kind of minimalist little story as well. Like, it doesn't even sort of say or do much or have any kind of big picture stuff going on. It's like basically just them hanging out and doing a few things. But like, it's really, it really touched me in a way that was very strange, especially for a chapter that has so much vomit in it. It's just like, but still, this is like really actually quite sweet and charming.
No, it really is. It's especially given more recent events in the manga, it also like tease you up very directly for being kicked in the mouth. The series, like you say, it has, like, I think in the Evangelion section, there was never really quite enough downtime for, you know, the actual home unit to come into its own, which is a shame because it's the sort of thing you see peaks of, but there's just not enough Evangelion to really get to it. Whereas in Chainsaw Man, you have chapters where it's like, we're inside this shitty apartment that is nominally Aki's, but he's now got these two idiots he's living with, including one who has like her idiot cat. And when you first meet her, she refuses to flush after she takes a poop. So, you know, things are super buggered then. But it is the fact that like, even like Power, who I think is a great character, but no one should ever aspire or find cool, even though she is fun to watch. Like, even she gets tempered, mostly through going through, well, actual literal hell, that you do get this unit coming together. And the three of them, you know, it kind of harkens back to another character who basically says, like, you know, if you start to feel yourself becoming sane, you should stop being a demon hunter because you're never going to survive and the people you love will vanish. And it's this sort of thing of like, oh no, the series is totally making good on that. It's not just saying like shit will go wrong, but things do go wrong. I mean, hell, you have a demon who literally like yells about the future being awesome and how he loves to see shit getting stupid, which is also extremely accurate. And yeah, the most recent arc ended in such a fucking gut punch of a way that I mean, the next chapter comes out tomorrow because it's delayed on Shonen Jump, but God, I have no idea what they're going to do next. Like, how do you even? Yeah, I love the series.
Well, and I think that is the true power with every pun intended of the series, is you literally don't ever know what's going to happen next with it. Like, there's, again, kind of having talked about the sort of, you know, the shonen tropes that it toys with, you know, there are so many stories, for better or for worse, where you kind of, you know at least the vague direction it's going in. You can kind of map out of like, okay, well, this is probably going to happen, and then this will happen to this character. And it's often like, you often read a story just to see the specifics of how something happens, but you know the broad strokes of what is going to happen. Whereas Chainsaw Man, it's just like, everything is up in the air, anything is possible at any given moment in time. And you really have no idea when you fire up a new chapter of what you're going to get. And that's even like true. And I mean, again, having talked about kind of like that whole touching chapter with Power, like next thing you know, she's just like having a road traffic accident, which is one of the funniest things that I've read in manga. And I'm cracking up just thinking about it. Like, it manages to have those pivots from like, you know, quite deep and touching to just utterly ludicrous and hilarious, like just on the turn of a sixpence. And it manages to do that over and over again. And I think that lets it get away with a lot of excesses, because like it has some of the kind of, there are moments in this series that could easily be some kind of like goth teenagers like OC fan fiction of just like, you know, character that only says Halloween, but actually there's a whole load of stuff going on there, which is kind of like, it's incredibly dumb, but it's also incredibly awesome. And there are so many little moments like that. Also,
that particular character and their deal is utterly terrifying. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, when you find out that character's deal, all you can really do is sort of lean back from and also that chapter is such a goddamn visual masterpiece, as is a lot of stuff around that sort of period and a lot of what happens in this manga. But you kind of can do nothing more than sort of lean back and go, fucking what? Like, are you kidding me? Like, you're doing this? And
I'm pretty sure that's exactly what I said out loud, sat on my bed reading that chapter of just like, you're what now?
It's a valid thing. I mean, as you say, like, I think as you say, like, the most powerful thing I can say about Chainsaw Man is I don't know what the hell is happening, and I could only guess, and I don't think I'm going to be right. Where, like, maybe you can see a direction of travel, but even with recent events, it's a case of, oh, okay, this is where we're going now. Because, you know, I mean, even, you know, bless it, but Dragon Ball Z, you'd be like, okay, they're waiting for Goku to get back. They're waiting for this. They're waiting for this. They're doing this. You know, we're doing this to get to this point. Whereas Chainsaw Man, it's like a fight just finished, but as of right now, I have no idea what any of the pages in the next chapter is going to look like, because God knows. Like, I mean, like I say, the cast went to goddamn hell. Like, they went to actual literal hell, and they somehow got back, and it still doesn't make any fucking sense. And I love it. I transcended this series from haha Chainsaw Man, please read Chainsaw Man, to no, I freaking love this series. It's legit one of my favorite things going right now.
Yeah, it is absolutely great. Yeah, and it's also a series, like, there are numerous points where I've thought, like, are we getting towards, like, the end game here? Because it feels like the stakes are so high and things are so dire and, you know, so desperate. It's like, surely this has got to be, like, it. Like, whatever happens at the end of this is going to be either close to or the actual ending. But then there's always something else that somehow, like, crops up. So, again, like, even in terms of, like, you know, as often discussing ongoing series and being like, yeah, well, I think we're getting close to the end game now. It's like, I don't even want to predict whether we're, like, 10% into this series or 98% into this series, because I really have no clue.
Yeah, no idea. But I'm more than happy to continue reading it. So that's the important thing, I guess.
Indeed.
Yeah, the single thing that is most worth your, like, you know, £1, whatever the hell, a week for Shonen Jump, or is it a month? I can't tell anymore.
It's a month, yeah. Like, it's that cheap for that kind of entertainment. A
merest pittance. So yeah, shit's wild. Also on the Shonen Jump bent is something else I've been catching up on, because I kind of remembered, is Kaguya-Sama Love is War. It turns out that this is £4 a volume on Amazon Kindle, so I've been burning through it like a silly bugger, and I've now reached up to volume 15, which is where it currently is published up to, because, like, once you've got the characters down and you've kind of gotten through the initial premise, it's really easy to binge this thing, because it's just continually funny, because once it's mapped out its web of the different student council idiots, it really goes to the races. And it reaches a weird point around volume 12 where it grows a real serious plot and actual timeline, while still being very stupid. And there's even a point where the author apologizes for all the serious business, like, drama, and says, don't worry, we're getting back to stupid crap. And then it has one chapter of stupid crap, which then immediately segues back into serious things. So, whoops, didn't last long. But yeah, I'm really loving this series. I love the cast. Like, I've gone from sort of snickering at them to kind of, like, cheering them on, and generally sort of enjoying their plight and everything. It even has, like, an interesting, like, arc for the, like, first year dour emo bangs dude. I forget his name. But yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, I've also forgotten his name there.
Yeah, you know, headphones dude. He looks like a Persona 3 protagonist. He does. But yeah, it's really good fun. As I say, it's extremely bingeable at £4 a volume, and it's been really fun just to kind of gallop along. And more often than not, like, the worst it will do is make you crack a smile, but at its best, like, the series has me just, like, guffawing my stupid head off.
Yeah. I mean, I've only been keeping up, like, by the anime adaptation, and, like, that is also, like, a series that is surprisingly good at being kind of heartfelt as well. Like, I mean, that's the second season of Kaguya-Sama, like, that episode around Headphones Dude, who shall forever remain nameless on this podcast from now on, I guess. Like, you know, that legit moved me to tears. Like, it's a really good, solid, like, well done arc. There's also a really great story about kind of Kaguya breaking her phone that is kind of like a very sort of ephemeral, like, yeah, what happens with all these memories I have stored on this device if this device breaks? And, you know, it does some really surprisingly good stuff with that, as well as being incredibly funny.
Yeah, plus in the manga, that first chapter where the phone is broken is the end of a volume, and I was just like, oh, fuck off, and I immediately bought the next one, because of course I had to see how that ended. But yeah, as someone who has had their phone basically, like, format its own storage on holiday and lose, like, an entire summer's worth of memories, yeah, totally. I mean, I still have the memories in my head, but I could do with the photos, thank you. Fuck you, phone.
Yeah, I mean, if there aren't tech companies, like, kind of queuing up to get Kaguya as like the front for their cloud backup service, then they're missing a trick.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm really enjoying, as I say, I kind of blinked, and before I knew it, I was on volume 15, and now there is a legitimate plot line and sort of timeline. And, you know, there even is a chapter where Kaguya basically says, no one loses if you confess to someone, and then there's a little cut-out box that says, explicitly refuting the central point of the manga, like, because it's just like, up, fourth wall, goodbye. But then, of course, it walks that back because things happen. So yeah, it's really good fun, especially, as I say, once the extended cast of long-suffering characters start to flesh out, it really gets fun. So great fun of that series. And as I say, like, £4 a volume, very easy to just slap that buy button until you go, oh, there's no more left, shit. Oh no, I'm caught up. Also the benefit of being an adult with disposable income. Hooray. Cool. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. It's great fun. It just gets more absurd and honestly more heartfelt because even, as I say, the cast become more real people and, you start to see more backing behind their intense, crazy neuroses, which is also then becomes the main stumbling block to them doing anything about it, as you may expect. So that works. Like when it wants to, it really gets you in the emotion. Okay. Anything else to say about that, Andy, or are you good?
No, I think I'm good.
Cool. Do you mind if I go first?
No, go for it.
Cool. Okay, so moving on to the main part of our show, what we've read for this episode. So I picked something kind of hot off the presses when I demanded we read it, because I had bought it literally 2 days before and laughed my stupid butt off, so you can tell it's going to be a positive review. But my pick was the new manga by Kaiten Books, a new publisher. My Dad's the Queen of All VTubers! ! The author is Akashihino Wataru. It's not currently complete. It's only got one volume out, both in English and in Japan. You can buy it digitally at the moment. I think physical versions are coming soon. It's slowly rolling out to different digital stores as Kaiten kind of get their process up and running. And so, as the first page sort of tells you with a very little helpful little text box, a VTuber, an online entertainer, typically represented by a 2D or 3D digital avatar. So, quick background and very short thesis on this. VTubers are all over YouTube, as you can probably guess. They're probably being retweeted by your crazy anime Twitter friends. Basically, it's a 3D or 2D model using like a motion tracking camera or using motion sensitivity. And mapping that onto a digital avatar. You may remember this from FaceRig years back when you could make yourself like a stupid cat, and then Live 2D came along, which was an open platform. Well, it's a closed platform, but an open format for making 2D animated girl faces, which you might see in some of my favorite mobile phone games. Like I'm pretty sure that the new Love Live has it, and a lot of different companies brand or use Live 2D because it's a known library for taking anime girl JPEGs and turning them into a character who moves just about okay, even though the mouth tends to move around their face quite a lot and it looks creepy. I find this whole thing fascinating. Unsurprisingly, you'll most likely find them on either Twitch or YouTube playing video games because narrating along to video games is easy, fun, and engaging, both for the character and for the game. And my personal sort of fascination with this, I kind of see this as like the newest iteration of what was originally just like Miku, like Hatsune Miku and Vocaloids. And then you may remember from the mists of 2014, Andy, we watched an episode of Mina Diva, which was that live streamed anime show, which was basically two girls with motion capture rigs on dancing around in front of a green screen. And then that was directly mapping on a 3D CG character onto them. And it was a complete nightmare to subtitle, and it constantly had technical problems. And it basically was like the ultimate skunkworks version of what is now something you can quite easily do with a half decent webcam, some half decent processing power and a PC. And just making sure you don't do anything stupid like put your hand behind your back. Whereas when we watched Mina Diva, you could see the studio and it was like 20 people. Well, it was like 12 people to make that show run. So it kind of shows how this has changed. And this kind of, from my mind, it first came to the fore with Kizuna Ai, who was like the virtual YouTuber idol, who was like a super AI, according to her own storyline. And then people got pissed off because the running company basically tried to franchise it out. And so kind of ruined the entire reason why people liked a singular character with a personality. And so now you have things like HoloLive, which friends of the podcast have admitted to me sheepishly that they totally just binge on those videos with the same regularity they used to do other sort of video streams. Anyway, this is my long run-up to say that I'm totally fascinated with VTubers, even though I do not really have a personal favourite, but I find the whole thing intensely fascinating. And it's a really crazy sort of just look into this world. And in the manga form, it's a good comedy. Because, as you can tell from the synopsis, the sort of title, this is about the main character, Takashi. I don't think he has a surname yet. And he's in love with the VTuber Kizuke Yai, which you can kind of see where that's coming from, quite obviously. But on panel 4 of page 1, he walks into his dad's room to say, "Hey, Dad, time for dinner." And whoops, it turns out that Kizuke Yai is his dad. He's rather buff dad with a little bit of chin stubble, kind of looking a bit like Tiger from Tiger and Bunny. Big beefy dude, big shoulders, and he's got like a motion capture rig on, and he is dancing around and throwing his arms up in the air and singing and dancing and being a VTuber. So, oops. It turns out that his dad quit his job a while ago because he fucking hated it. And he's now full-time VTubing. And in his own words, my panty shots have been putting food on our table for months. So, oops. This is quite an interesting premise on its own, but I think the main source of this series comes in the second element, whereas you could imagine the main character is wanting to run away from this real fast. But he runs into his mum's room to go, "Hey, mum, my dad's a weirdo. Oh shit." And his mum is also wanting to be a VTuber, but she sucks. She's really bad. She doesn't know how to really do it. She's very coarse. Everyone thinks she's a dude behind the virtual avatar, which is, of course, like the irony in that she's super hot, got big tits, and if she turned off the whole visual filtering of the VTuber software, she'd probably have fans a la Twitch streamers. But she loves VTubers, and so it must be a virtual her that appears, not herself, who is very Misato-like, eating bar snacks, drinking beer, burping. And so main character decides to try and find a way to help his mum get lots of subscribers. That way she'll knock it off, and then he can work on trying to get his dad to knock it off before he breaks down and has a heart attack because he has been a big fan of his dad, and oh shit, it's my dad who is this anime girl. And so it goes from there. Of course, he gets roped into being like a companion to Kizuke in a live stream. He finds out his friends are big fans of Kizuke, and it has a bunch of short side stories and such kind of cobbled together. And as you can tell, I really love this series. It's got a lot of really good physical comedy. The main characters... Oops, sorry. Most notably, there's a really good page gag where the main character's eyeballs pop fully out of his skull, and in the next pane you see him like slapping his eyeballs back into his skull, which made me crack up. It's got a lot of really good funny comedy. The dad is a massive source of all comedy because he's, as I say, big buff dude dancing around. He seems to exist only in a black Vinnie Caravella t-shirt. And at the same time, there's something weirdly wholesome about it because it's never really fully judgy because his dad had a shitty job and he hated being an office worker, and now he's been kind of set free. And, he has a happy family life. He loves his wife. He loves his kid. But it's all gone through this rather strange lens of being a virtualized internet celebrity who flashes his virtual panties at people. And so, yeah. And it's really like up to date and kind of like frighteningly bleeding edge. Like I worry sometimes that some of the localization is a bit too on the edge. But yeah, it's really funny where even the main character says at some point, like, why the hell is this happening? How is this happening? This sucks. Both my parents are terminally online, and so this is why I'm in this situation, which, yeah, is dangerous. And so, yeah, I've gone on for far too long. Sorry, Andy. But yeah, as you can tell, massive fan of this. Found it absolutely hilarious start to finish. It's kind of shown to me that it already has like a lot of stuff it can work on and other sort of ideas. So I'm not worried about the gag getting old. If anything, I'm slightly worried about the shine going off of the whole VTuber idea before the manga ends. Who knows how long these things last. But yeah, find it absolutely fascinating and hilarious and a really good laugh. So yeah, Andy, what did you think about this?
I enjoyed it. It's definitely like my concern, like before this even kind of came up on the podcast and I started seeing people tweeting about it, etc., was like, surely that premise isn't going to last for more than like a chapter or two before it runs out of road. But actually, yeah, it has plenty to work with, to kind of keep things fresh and to find new twists on a pretty similar premise. Like it never strays too far from kind of the baseline idea that's right there in the series title, but it has enough to be getting on with, to kind of keep it fun. And I think the thing that makes this series sort of endearing from the get-go is that there are lots of good comedy manga that start out, relatively quiet, relatively sedate, and then slowly kind of ramp things up over time. I mean, like Kaguya-Sama we were just talking about, like it starts off on one level and it kind of escalates wildly as you go through like volume after volume, and it finds ever more kind of outlandish and big things to do with its premise. Whereas this series, like, it doesn't have to crank it up to 11 because it starts out at 11 and then it just keeps on kind of cranking the dial from there. And like by the end of this volume, you're kind of at 25 or so at least. And I think there's a sheer energy to that kind of really helps to carry it. Like it doesn't it doesn't feel the need to start off kind of quiet and then get stronger. Like it hits you with its kind of like some of its biggest moments and kind of best gags right at the start, and then just kind of ups its ante from there. And I think that sort of pacing and energy just really kind of helps it to keep on going and keep on trucking, because it just gets you in the right frame of mind, and then it just kind of starts as it means to go on, and then just carries on from that point forward.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the main thing this series does is it's learned not to keep its powder dry. Like, it doesn't try and tiptoe around the whole thing about, oh no, my dad's a VTuber, or even keeping the main character in the dark. It's just like, bam, page 1, here is your dad, like, prancing around in front of an picture screen, TV screen. And so it just goes. And like I say, like, I think, as I say, the secret sauce for this, for me at least, is the like unmentioned second half of the like storyline is, oh, my mum also wants to be a VTuber, but she sucks at it. And so it gives you this sort of counterplay. And of course, unsurprisingly, the mum hates Kizuki-ai, not knowing it's her own husband, because she's like, fuck off, it's probably some old dude. Meanwhile, everyone calls her an old dude because she like scratches her belly when she's on stream. Oops. And so, yeah, it really kind of completes the circle of like, oops, VTubing is stupid. And like, you know, there's always an unwritten rule with some characters that don't go being an idiot and going, oh, are you a boy or a girl in the fucking like chat, unless they want to talk about it, because, you know, you're here for the character, not for the human underneath. So, you know, but while of course admitting that the character is brought to life by the actor and they are one and the same, which is also where Kizuna-ai went weird. So like, let the pantomime continue, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess if there is kind of, my one counterpoint to that is I would like to see the series flesh out some of its characters a bit more beyond the whole VTuber thing. I mean, in particular, like Takeshi's love interest, who, you know, is also like a big Kizuna-ai fan, and like blah blah blah. Like, that's kind of like her only thing. That's pretty much all we get to see of her, is just her like talking about VTubers. Like, I'd really like to see that character get fleshed out a bit, of like, you know, why is Takeshi interested in her? Like, there's got to be a bit more to her character than that. And I think that's kind of true of a lot of the supporting cast in particular. Like, I mean, one of my favorite little bits from this first volume is getting to see a bit of Takeshi's mum just like doing her normal day job, which, as it turns out, is like taking karate lessons, which totally made sense and just like filled in a big blank for that character and that personality. And then likewise, there's another really nice little flashback bit later on that's just like her and the dad, like before they were dating, when like, you know, Takeshi's dad was at college and like, you know, she was still like at high school or whatever. And there's just like a really nice little moment just kind of showing like what their relationship was like at the get-go before they were even actually together. And like, I really liked those little moments to build up a bit more kind of rapport and a little bit more around those characters. And I kind of hope that moving forward, it does at least some of that with the rest of the cast, because I feel like it does add a little bit of flavour and a little bit more power to those characters when you get to see them beyond just the scenario that they've been dumped into.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I really enjoy their parents' like rapport and their like little snippets you get with them, because it's usually utterly adorable, if also stupid, which really helps. It's like a cute little like Orig Monogatari almost snuck in. But yeah, I just say so far everything is directly related to VTubers or VTubing fans or etc. And so it all kind of makes a very small world, whereas some, like, at least for my money, one of the interesting things about VTubers is that they're basically on one station, one place, and they have one vector, which is videos. And then there are other things around them, like there's fandom, obviously, but that is their primary output. And it's kind of easily circumscribed and kind of easily limited, where, you know, you sit down, you watch a video, you close the video tab, you put your phone in your pocket and you walk on with your day. And that's kind of one of the nice things about this whole like phenomena, is you can fit it into your life in a very discreet kind of way. Whereas, you know, in this manga, VTubing is everything. VTubing is life. It's almost an industry unto itself, and which makes it a bit strange, although of course play for comedic effect. So as you say, like having the main character Takeshi and his friends like doing more and just hanging out would be really fun, just to kind of put a bit more flesh onto the bones of the world. and also like almost like show the normalcy he wants to protect before his dad ruined it, because he walked in on him doing his act.
Yeah, and I mean that's the nice thing, that this volume does at least seem like it's willing to kind of go and do like, flashbacks and to kind of drop back deeper into time to see some of that stuff. So I certainly hope it manages to continue to squeeze some of that in, because this is the kind of trap that a lot of series, especially kind of like sports series, tend to fall into, where you've got something like Chihaya Furuyasaki, when no matter what else is going on, it's just like everybody is just always hyper focused on insert sport here. And it's kind of like that, but with VTubers, of just like everyone's just doesn't talk about anything other than VTubers. And it's like even the people I know on Twitter who are really into that, they have other stuff that they talk about as well. Like, it's not quite that all encompassing.
Yeah, I mean, some people of that kind, you worry about them because they're into multiple expensive hobbies. So it's like, oh shit. Also, VTubing has come along obviously during a time of pandemic, so you can't really fucking go to an event in Japan to go see idols, can you? Like, so it's a case of, well, again, you can watch streams of previous lives, and also you can get into this whole new theme of like virtual idling. Oh god, why can't I escape this hellhole? So
yeah, I do feel like I feel like I've seen things take off a bit more in terms of people sharing stuff on my streams from like since the kind of the whole pandemic thing, because I guess it is a far more accessible kind of variant of some of the things that people like from idols, etc. So it's probably been to their benefit in a weird kind of way.
Plus, there is something fun about watching like a weird high pitched anime girl playing Fallout New Vegas and doing it kind of badly.
Yes, there is that.
Yeah.
The one other thing I guess that I would mention, which is more of a kind of like localization thing, is there's a pretty interesting like afterword from like the translator for the series.
Totally.
That kind of talks about their own kind of having to dig deep into sort of the culture and some of the weird little kind of proclivities and things people like post in the chat and like trying to figure out what they mean. That's all really interesting. I wish that had been beefed out into proper translation notes, though. Like, I feel like having read that thing of like, oh yeah, there's all this stuff that I had to kind of research and look up, I would really have liked to have seen a more direct kind of fruits of those research, of just like the usual line by line, hey, here are all the weird little things, and kind of like what they mean in a more specific way. Because it sort of felt like there's maybe a missing layer there, given what that kind of afterward says about like the research required, that maybe it would have been nice to have that laid out a little bit more kind of explicitly in the back of the book. Yeah,
I can totally buy that. I mean, I think the little note at the start is nice, just as a quick little get you up to speed, but that's only one element. And as you say, like I kind of got everything in this manga, but that's also because I am far too online for my own good and listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of Twitter, and I should probably just log off and not do this anymore. But it meant that I enjoyed this manga and got every word of it, even if, like I say, like some parts of it seem almost fated to date real fast because they're extremely sort of very close, as it were. But I also enjoyed that little note from the translator. Also, the translator's name is on the cover, which is nice. More series should do that. I think it's nice to give the translators a shout out, because hell, they're having to like translate and localize a whole work. So give those people a shout out.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say, like, I think a lot of that stuff, a lot of that kind of more into the weeds references, it's not like you have to know that stuff. Like, I mean, I suspect there's probably a whole bunch of things that I kind of either didn't get or just kind of glossed over and didn't even really think about. Like, the core story is there and will work as long as you have even the vaguest understanding of what VTubers are, which, I mean, I suspect the target market for this are all kind of well aware of at least the high level of like, yeah, this is what a VTuber is, this is what they do. And that's really all you need. There's not any kind of massive barrier to entry of like, oh yeah, it's not packed with in-jokes or kind of, deeply referential humor, or anything that is there is very much just kind of like in the periphery that, hey, if you get it, if you get the in gag, then you'll probably like get an extra kind of chuckle out of it, but you're not going to be left kind of like reading an entire chapter and being like, I didn't get any of those jokes.
Yeah, I mean, most of the like in jokes and the little references remind me of Penny Pony Dash like chalkboard jokes, where they'd be in there for half a cut and you'd see this chalkboard joke that was referencing a giant robot theme from 1983 or something, but if you don't get that, you just look at your eye skims over it on the page and you think, wow, this is wacky, and you don't need to worry about it. It's not like, you know, a 5-page lead up for a joke goes dead because it hinged on something really obscure. I mean, you know, also, like, although it does poke fun at VTubers in particular, it does take the whole thing in good nature. And as I say, it kind of shows it's being a positive force in that it lifted the dad out of his shitty job. And, you know, it does get a bit over much at times, but it is very positive and very sort of like, all this is very silly, but if we take it in good faith, then this is all the fun adventure we're all on. And isn't new media fascinating? Which my basic response to that is yes. And that's why I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, and it never gets too bogged down in kind of trying to make its premise work. I mean, there's literally a line where his wife's like, yeah, I don't know, husband like soundproofed the house 6 months ago. I have no idea why, but oh well. And it just like, you know, it's quite happy to just shrug off things that are kind of an inconvenience to the potential, like, well, actually, this would never happen in real life, because it's like, hey, guess what? This is not a documentary. It really doesn't matter. And I think, again, that kind of helps it, because it doesn't really give you holes to pick in the narrative, because it makes it very clear from the get-go. It's like, yeah, of course this is outlandish and dumb. Like, please don't think about it too hard. We've covered the bare minimum of why this setup works, and anything beyond that, just fill it in with your own imagination. It's fine. Yeah.
Meanwhile, have a look at this dude with stubble dancing around and, like, making weird chicken arm motions, because that's funny. So, yeah. But yeah, I greatly enjoyed this. I'm glad you did as well. I as I say, I think this is like at the exact right time for it to come out. And so kudos to Kaiten for picking it up and kind of turning it around while it's still relevant, because you can imagine this coming out like 2 months too late and everyone's like, what? Who cares? Like, why would anyone bother with that anymore?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think like even the whole kind of Kizuna Eye joke kind of feels dated now, because it's like, oh yeah, remember her? And it's like, that was like 3 months ago, you know, and it's like that is the speed at which kind of these things can fade out of the popular conscience. So yeah, like who knows, maybe even if we get to like our end of year podcast, we'll mention this and be like, wow, remember VTubers? Because that's like how fast these things move these days.
Well, even as someone who wants to try and keep abreast of it, like even that is still accelerating. Like the Kizuna Eye stuff has, like, you can read a timeline about stuff that happened, and you read it and you go, wait, it took 2 whole weeks for all this to collapse? Like the main sort of crux and fulcrum of all this going wrong was really fast, like even for internet time. And also mostly because the people producing it handled it so fucking badly. And like even HoloLive, which is like a big stable, like it's like a 765, it's like a 567 Pro of a Namco Pro of like virtual idols. And even they have said full out, oh, we're doing seasons and we're graduating idols in time. So these characters will go away in time. And it's like, this is so nuts. Like this is accelerated so far beyond, you know, the initial inklings of someone using Live 2D or, you know, a fucking face rig off of a Steam sale to make themselves look like a chimp and play PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. Like everything's gone so fast. And of course, it's only gotten madder with the pandemic and everyone being stuck inside.
Yeah. I mean, if VTubers are getting seasons now, does that mean they're going to start getting battle passes next? Was that where we're going with this?
Oh yeah, you have to guess that there's going to be like a Twitch bits style thing where you have to donate or subscribe or help moderate chat in order to get battle pass levels. And I should stop talking now before this becomes real. If it's not already, I'm probably like wishing it into existence right now.
Yeah, I totally feel we're gonna get a message on this. Like, well, did you not know this is already a thing?
Yeah.
So yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, I'm sure by the time I've edited this, like it'll be too late. So anyway, yeah. I really enjoyed this manga. It was really funny. Really liked it. Cool. So this is where your pick comes in, Andy. As a quick programming note, because Shaman King was delayed shortly after our previous episode was recorded, we've had to change topic. So Andy, why don't you introduce our new surprise topic for yourself?
Yeah. This is what happens when you try to be like right on the bleeding edge of what's coming out. When somebody says like, yeah, all of these masses of volumes will be released on this day, and like that seems improbable, but sure, like their marketing people must know what the deal is, and then just days later it's like, oh no, that's been delayed till the end of the year. So Shaman King is off the menu, and so as quite the pivot, I've instead picked New Game Volume 1 as my choice for this show, which is a series that I really enjoyed the anime adaptation of. That was kind of my introduction to it. It got a very, very solid, very entertaining and amusing anime adaptation, and I've kind of been meaning to go back and actually like start reading the source material, and so things being as they were, that seemed like the perfect opportunity to do so. And so New Game is the story of Aoba Suzukaze, who is a new hire at a video game developer rather. So it's her first day on the job, or doing any job at all, indeed. And so she kind of turns up with that usual kind of bundle of nerves, and kind of starts out on the road of being an artist and character designer, basically, for a video game studio. So this is kind of a really interesting sort of it's a 4-panel slice of life series, and it's very kind of, idealized, etc., but also, like, it manages to balance that really well with having kind of a sense of feeling like a very real sort of working life kind of manga at the same time. Like, it does a really good job of nailing certainly kind of like your first day at a new job, or at kind of any job really. It has a really good grasp of what that's like, and also kind of more broadly what it's like to just start out in the working world. That horrific moment when you realize that like a decade plus of education has given you zero preparation for actually doing an actual proper job, because it's just so like completely different, and it's just a massive culture shock. And it manages to do all of that really well, while still being kind of fun and pretty light and fluffy, and like, all of the characters are kind of likable and friendly, etc. I don't know, it's a nice kind of light and easy read in that sense, that it's also the kind of thing that like anybody who's held down a full-time job can kind of sit and nod along at the same time as just kind of enjoying that. And it was actually interesting to see in the afterword of this volume, because I've like, having watched the anime adaptation, my assumption was that the author had probably worked in like video game development at some point, and it turns out that they had for a few years, and clearly they sort of poured in plenty of their own kind of like personal lived experiences, and kind of melded it into this sort of cute girls working for a video game development company sort of scenario at the same time. And I think that's kind of what helps it really work, is that it just has that blend of those two elements, and kind of manages to pull them both off without ever feeling too trite, but also not getting too deep into the weeds. Cause God knows, if there was like a team of all female video game developers, this volume would have been full of them getting death threats. So like, thank God they didn't go down that route. So yeah, like much like the anime adaptation, I just ended up really enjoying this. Like, there's not anything kind of too much to it. But it's nicely illustrated. Like, all the characters' designs are really good and strong, and kind of, come through well. It gets a bit fan servicey in places, but kind of manages to make that into enough of a running joke that you can kind of just like shrug and be like, sure, whatever, this is a bit weird, but okay. And so yeah, I just kind of broadly enjoyed it, really. I don't know how you came down on it, Elliot.
I mean, I enjoyed it, but I kind of came down it in a slightly different way. Like, I've watched about 3 or 4 episodes of the anime, and yeah, it's fully enjoyable. It's very cute. It kind of takes a lot of what is happening on the manga page and puts it on the big screen and makes it move, obviously, and makes the colours more vibrant. But that's kind of it. Like, it's a pretty straight adaptation, at least to my mind, from what I watched. But I must admit, like, I feel like the fan service quotient is high in this series, but it's just missing us, as we're not really the target market. I mean, when this was first announced, like, as being released manga wise, I was like, oh, they've listed it as Yuri, weird. And then you realize that there are no male characters on the page ever. All the characters, as you mentioned, are girls, and it is basically like just like kind of throbbing almost, or thrumming with like Yuri energy, as it were, because all the characters look like dolls. They're all kind of frighteningly young for what they're doing. I mean, admittedly, Albert is fresh out of high school, and so he's like 18 and is starting a job rather than going into vocational college or comp sci, and then, you know, in her first stage, she gets given like a handbook about Maya and is told to, right, go through tutorials, which was terrifying as someone who does like 3D modeling in his spare time. And I felt garbage when I'm like, oh fuck, she's made more than I ever have. Oh wait, it's a full-time job in China Week to make a single person. Thank fuck. Having spent like multiple hours today to try and make a spaceship look bad. But yeah, and it's, as I say, it's really kind of drenched in this sort of like charmed Yuri Wonderland, where even when characters being dressed down or being exposed to what are the vulgarities and the harshness of working life, like working overnight, it always makes it come to the good, and it kind of always bounces into a positive place. Like even the whole like sleepover at work thing involves like multiple jokes about wearing a bare sleeping bag and cute pajamas, and oh, isn't it quite nice to take off your pants at work after hours when no one's watching? Isn't it liberating? And there's like a really strong sci hero vibe, or even like you know, the two female teachers in as a manga vibe between the two older senpai. What's their name? The directors. I wrote it down and I've forgotten. Ko and something else.
Oh, and Ko and Ren.
Ko and Ren. Yeah, they are totally like I feel like they were like, I feel like almost they've almost come from like a Yuri Dojin somewhere. Just the energy between them is so strong. And yeah, and never shall anything else like sully this girl's wonderland. Like at one point, Alba is trying to figure out what to do with her face paycheck, and she buys a cake for her parents, which is very adorable. But you never see the parents because they should never exist. This is our Yuri Wonderland. And I know I'm going on this a lot, but it did kind of colour my viewing of the work, and like made me feel kind of suspect to the whole thing. Like you get the afterword with the little hedgehog author saying, like basically that he synthesized all the pain and horror of his own like work in the games industry, and like basically polished it through this pleasant lens to bring you a much more healthy view of working life. And it still has, like, as you say, like some rough moments where Alba's trying to get used to working life, but as I say, the whole thing is just cosseted within this very sort of charmed existence that it's hard to see any real sort of trauma there. And it's kind of nice, like the characters all have a nice rapport. They're funny characters, you know, they're kind of cute. One of them's a massive like prop nut who has loads of figures and does motion. And so like at one point she's like waving a lightsaber around to help animate a sword slashing animation, which is cool. And yeah, that's what I'd probably do if I had like to animate characters. So yeah, it's cute and like, but I must admit, maybe it's just the manga or the very flat 4-panel nature of it, where, as you say, it's a 4-panel manga, but it isn't strictly one gag strip sort of thing, and there are no like titles at the top of the strips. So it took me a little second to get that, but it kind of came down as being this extremely saccharine. And as I say, like, you know, I like Yuri titles, but this was a bit too like just charmed and away with the fairies for my liking. So maybe I'll go. I mean, it was fine. I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I hoped I would, if that makes sense from having watched the anime.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like this is, I forget what title it was we talked about a podcast or so ago. It was, Tom and Chan is a girl that kind of like sometimes feels like it doesn't need to be a 4-panel series, but it almost becomes constrained by that. Like, I feel like this also had those vibes at times. Like, there are little points at the start of chapters sometimes where it breaks out of that occasionally. Or like you say, there are also points where it sort of, you know, it pulls something across multiple strips and kind of maybe sort of, you know, at least bends that format a little bit. But there are certainly times where it's like, this didn't really need to be a 4-panel comedy manga. Like, it would probably have actually worked better had it had a bit more freedom with its paneling than that. And you know, maybe it could have done with having a bit more confidence to go outside of the confines of that. So yeah, I mean, I do think that's certainly fair. And this is not really kind of like a sort of a laugh out loud kind of comedy thing. It's definitely one of those things of a kind of like a smile and nod of like, yep, that's a thing that can happen at work sort of thing. Like, especially working in a creative industry, you know, there are definitely some things that kind of rang true, etc. from that. And it has those moments. I mean, I don't know, like, I feel like beyond kind of Ko and Rin's relationship, I feel like the Yuri angle is pretty mild at best. Like most of the other characters are just kind of like there doing their thing. Like, I mean, much in the same way that like Hidamari's sketch has its kind of scion hero, and then everyone else is kind of really to the side of that. Like, this kind of felt pretty similar in terms of them being the only sort of overt pair of characters that were being kind of lined up to be a couple in any particular sense.
Yeah, I think for me it's more the fact that, like, I don't know, like, I mean, I've talked about this before, where, like, you end up with these, like, monogendered, like, series where it's, you know, it's more fun to draw cute girls. Whereas I feel like, I don't know, it's just something about the tenor of New Game, or the way it pitched it, just made it seem like this really weird, rarefied, like, paradise of adorable girls. I don't know. There's something about it. I mean, hell, like Girls and Panzer does the same thing, although you'll see like some dudes exist. Even Love Live has like a dad somewhere maybe in it. Whereas in this series, it is very much a case of like, no, girls only. Fuck you. Like, there's only cute girls. There's only these cute girls. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's just something about it that rubbed me up the wrong way, or made some weird flip in my head flip. But I don't. Yeah. But at the same time, like you say, it's a fun read, like, it's cute. It even has some sort of weird dark moments where, like, the characters are basically having tea time at work, which, bloody hell. But one of them says, oh, what's going to happen? If we're doing badly, are they going to cancel the game? Oh, don't worry, it won't come to that. And then, like, there's an asterisk, which is, it often does. It's like, oh, shit. author talking from experience in the corner there. So yeah, it does get to that point of being interesting. And as I say, like, I felt a kinship with Alba, having tried to do 3D modeling in Blender, and like for every step forward in that I find 3 more things I cannot do for the life of me and end up screaming.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like all of that stuff, you know, certainly felt like it sort of came from a realistic place in terms of sort of, you know, the actual work element, which is, yeah, like maybe not the most important part of the series in terms of what it's interested in, but it felt like it had grounding to it, and I think that does help, that it didn't feel like it was a complete just kind of like pulled out of the air, like, I wanted to set this in a video game studio because it's cool, or like it very much kind of felt like, yeah, this has at least come from a somewhat studied place of someone who's been there and done that, and it does add a certain something to it.
Yeah, I mean, also, like, from having made a very small game and released it, like, game development is insane, and it's a lot of work, and you won't see a lot of that work because quite a lot of it gets tossed in the bin at some point. And it's a wonder, I mean, to steal the words of someone smarter than I, it's a wonder any video games get made ever, because holy cow, they are difficult to make, let alone make work well or good. So it's just like, wow, video games, what the hell?
Yeah, indeed. But yeah, I mean, I've got to admit, like, I don't know whether I'm currently kind of more jonesing to like go back and rewatch the anime rather than necessarily kind of pick up more of the manga. But I think, you know, I don't know, if you're into the premise and you're looking for something that's relatively cutesy and slice of lifey, but not going kind of full bore down the kind of, you know, sort of Hidamari sketch style where nothing that much really happens a lot of the time, then, you know, this is a pretty solid choice down that particular path.
Yeah, I definitely think it's interesting because it is in a more interesting sort of situation, and like you say, like Alba, like acclimatizing to a new workspace and meeting strange, weird, like, colleagues is good fun. I must admit, one thing about the localization of the manga that was kind of wild was how it like localized the different accents of the characters. Like the three co-workers she's in the cube with all have different accents, and like the weird white-haired one who dresses like a goth lolly has like this weird, like, you know, sort of vulgar English sort of accent. And yeah, I was just, and then at some point it's like, oh, someone references her being from Kansai, like speak from the Kansai area. And I'm like, oh, so you made like Kansai Bear Northern? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, that was a really weird moment where, like, I was trying to kind of figure out why, because it's sort of this came into my head in a really strange way, that it's just like, why have I started imagining like Yun's character as a Cockney? And then I started kind of reading the lines a bit kind of closer. It's like, because that's what they are. Like, they've basically been written as some kind of like EastEnders extra, like from the Queen Vic for the entire series, which, like, hey, that's a choice, and localizing dialects is hard, but that's maybe not the path I would have gone down.
Yeah, it makes it really weird. It makes her seem extremely rude at times, which I'm not not sure if that is her character or I'm just reading it weird, but like when she's like calling someone a tosser, I'm like, that's really strong for a workplace. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I've worked in some workplaces, but yeah, like for the characters in question and for kind of the overall vibe of the series, yeah, seeing Yun calling somebody a tosser was that was a moment for sure.
Yeah, I think the worst I would go is git, and that would only be in like a comedic form, whereas anything stronger than that you'd write down and then delete and then rip up the paper because you don't want to get fired. But yeah, it's real wild. It makes her seem very strange. But yeah, as I say, there are different accents to the characters which sometimes come together. It's weird. I'd like to talk to the localizer about that choice at some point. But yeah, I think along with you, I'm kind of more energized to rewatch the anime, frankly, because I remember really enjoying it. So I kind of just like to, and also like it's a lot more free flowing rather than 4 panels. So I can totally go back to the anime, and I'd like to see the characters like game it up, as it were. Also, the anime, the first series of the anime covers like a volume and a half, and then the second series of anime covers like 4 volumes. So it really kind of picks things up and goes after that first series. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of thing that almost makes me curious to read the manga, just to see how much they kind of cut out to make that work and make that happen. Because it kind of makes sense in terms of, you know, the early going does a lot of heavy lifting of like, hey, here's how all this stuff works, here's how this industry works and what these jobs entail. But you've got to imagine that there's a lot of stuff hitting the cutting room floor for that second season. So that does at least make me curious to maybe dig in and read more.
I think the second series in particular, like, because it kind of has the characters starting on a whole new game, like, it's probably a lot more contiguous stuff to cover. Like, almost like Shirobako, where, like, the start of that series is slowly filling you in on different bits and pieces, and then the second half of it is, like, off to the races because it's already set you up, and now it can just let itself fly free and say, right, you know all that stuff, and now we're going to, like, go ham because we totally can now. For sure. And I will just say, I will forever be enraged that they didn't call the second season of the anime New Game Plus. It's like, talk about missing an open goal. Yeah, I mean, we talked about that on like the old anime podcast we used to do, didn't we?
Yeah.
Like, we actually got in a conversation about that back then. But yeah, you're right. Like, why the hell wouldn't you call it that? What are you doing? Come on. So yeah, that's an issue. Anything else, Andy?
No, that's it.
One last thing, sorry, because I've another reason why I kind of went onto this whole Girls Wonderland thing is that the characters take up an awful lot of the page space. I mean, it is 4 panel with, you know, 2 4-panel strips a page, and so when you have multiple characters talking to each other, it's like, oh, this is all girls, taking up the panel, which is fine. But also the art looks very nice. Like, when I was halfway through this, because it's about 135 page volume, Elliot Page watch, I guess. I was like, oh, this is really well detailed. And I was reading it on my black and white tablet, and I thought, is this full color? And I'm like missing out on all the color. And I booted it up on another machine. I'm like, oh no, it's black and white. It just looks really expressive. And maybe it was originally drawn in color. Who knows? But it does have a lot of depth and like texture to it in coloring or grading, I suppose.
Yeah, it's strange as well because there are some 4 color pages like right at the start, but then there's kind of a weird point in chapter 1 where like you have full color and then you have not full color, but it looks like it was, and then it kind of goes into its actual kind of normal art style. So I don't know what the deal is there, like whether it was originally meant to be color at some point and then they said like, no, you're not having that many color pages. Like, who do you think you are, you tosser? And then, you know, they just kind of went on from there. But yeah, like it is a little bit weird in that first chapter because you kind of have like 3 art changes from like color to black and white, but more details to the normal. So I don't know quite what the deal is.
Yeah,
there.
and it also is alongside the fact that it goes from free flowing to 4 panel, and it's like, oh, this is sticking around. Weird.
Yeah,
but yeah, I was kind of struck at one point, going, I must be missing something because this looks really like well detailed in the coloring, and then no, it's not. It's just as it is, and I was like, oh, okay, shit, fool me then. So yeah, as I say, I moaned a lot, but I did enjoy it. So kind of, but as I say, I'll probably go back to the anime. Cool. So that's been our picks for this episode. So moving on to our picks for next episode. As we have a bit of a backlog going, I thought I'd be a bit adventurous, and I've picked Not a light novel, not a manga, an actual real deal book. I've picked up, because it got a reprint recently, which made it available for less than stupid money. So I have chosen the book Manga, The World of Japanese Comics, which originally was written in 1983 by Frederick Choate, and has been updated since with a few extra words. So I'm reading through that now, and I want to talk about that because even though it's not a work of manga itself, it's a very interesting milestone in talking about manga. So I want to talk about it. Hooray. And Andy, what have you picked out?
So I picked a series that I've seen people kind of talking about now and then, and it's kept like popping up on my radar, and then I promptly forget about it. So to make sure I don't do that again, I've made it the subject for our next podcast, and that is Volume 1 of BL Metamorphosis. Also
sounds like some kind of terrifying horror story.
Which, it's like, it's not some kind of like, Franz Kafka, like, fan work or anything, fan fiction. It's fine.
God.
It has an interesting premise in its own right. So I'm very curious to read it.
A shitty low-level government clerk wakes up one day to find out he has yaoi hands. Oh no! This is worse than being a cockroach. Shit. Oh God. Don't read side note, don't read the Metamorphosis when drunk. It's real bad. Short and bad.
Yeah. That seems like good advice.
Yeah, don't do what I did. Anyway, so thank you everyone for listening. If you want to catch up the rest of our episodes, you can find them on our website, ScreenTone.club, alongside show notes. If you like the podcast, please consider telling a friend. Word of mouth is still the best way for podcasts to grow, and we would greatly appreciate you saying nice things about us, or just saying things about us, frankly. Ratings and reviews on that note are very greatly appreciated onto your podcast feed thingy-ding of choice. You can also find us on Twitter at ScreenTone Club. You can also email us. The address is show@screentone.club if you want to just reach out for whatever reason. You can also, by the time this comes out, we should have our YouTube channel live once I press the big red button which says expose it to the internet. So we'll see if I gather my courage and do that. Finally, a personal plug. My name's Elliot Page, and you can find me at Elliot Page on Twitter. I've been reunited with my cat, who I am posting lots of pictures about right now. When she's actually in the house, she's become lord of the local loch almost. Little sod. She's already beaten up two of my neighbours' cats. Don't do that. Holy shit! I'm trying not to piss off these people. They already think I'm the weird Southerner Englishman. Anyway, Andy, how about you?
You can find out about my weird adventures in being a weird Southerner Englishman in Glasgow at Hannah's 1979.
See, that just means that you can't understand them and they can't understand you, so it's all fine. Whereas I can understand people here, but they can't understand me, so whoops. Oh, well. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening, and hope you join us again, and good night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.